You're listening to the Product Coalition podcast with Jay Stansell. This is where product mastery happens. This is where careers are made. Welcome to the Product Coalition podcast. Let's go.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to another Product Coalition podcast episode. Today, we're diving into one of the most important conversations in product right now. That's how to build AI-powered products that actually drive revenue and engagement. So with AI dominating headlines, investment strategies, boardroom conversations, there's been an industry-wide rush to ship AI features. But the reality is many of these features are going unused, fail to drive real business value, and become distractors rather than differentiators. So that's why I'm thrilled to have Naomi Fitzpatrick with me today. Naomi is a powerhouse in AI-driven product development with over a decade of experience leading teams at Open, Typeform, Intercom, and Microsoft SwiftKey. She's not only built features that people actually use, but ones that impact business strategy, engagement, and revenue. And now Naomi's track record is incredible. At Open, she scaled self-serve automation from 9% to 93% in just 8 months. At Intercom, she led our AI-powered chatbots that resolved 33% of customer queries. And at Microsoft SwiftKey, she helped launch an AI-driven product that hit 1 million downloads in 24 hours. This was featured in Apple's keynote and recognized as one of the best apps of the year. Today, Naomi's going to share her experience and break down what makes AI-powered products actually work. Naomi, welcome to the show. So awesome to chat with you today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for such a lovely intro as well, Jay.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Today's all about building AI products. But Naomi, I'm sure your career started way before the AI rush. Would you mind talking us through your origin story and what has been your product journey today?
Yeah, good question. As you mentioned, I've been in product for quite a while. But before that, I was actually an engineer, and I have a bit of a ridiculous degree as well in terms of computer science and drama, which at the time probably didn't make much sense. But now being kind of in product and in the kind of engineering and tech world, it actually makes a lot of sense because you're trying to understand a lot of human behavior side of things at the same time as trying to understand technology and then put the those two things together. So for me, it makes sense in retrospect, but at the time probably didn't make that much sense. I was engineer for a little while and then found myself in a bit of an innovation lab. And someone actually told me at that time, do you realize you're a product manager? And at the time I had no idea what that even meant. And then I found the job at SwiftKey, and the rest is kind of history, really.
Love it. Awesome. Why was today's topic around, building successful AI products by focusing on the people, not the tech? Why was that an important topic title for you?
I think especially at the moment, like almost in the last 2 weeks, I feel like it's really, really changed with DeepSeek and OpenAI and all of that kind of going on at the same time. But for me, I think the whole reason that you build technology, or the whole reason that you build products in the first place, is to help people do their jobs better, or to help people do whatever it is that they're trying to do better. And I think the thing that's coming up with AI a lot of the times is obviously investors are really interested in that space, and people are really interested in that space at the moment. But I think if you forget the human side of things, then you end up just in that space of building technology for technology's sake, which was always a bit of a quagmire at the beginning of my product journey anyway. And I think it was at Intercom and at Typeform, at places like that, where that's really drilled into you that actually, if you're not building for your customers, then who are you building for? And I'm definitely seeing that same pattern kind of reoccur with AI, where it's like, we've got this feature. Does anyone need it? No, but we've built it. And it's kind of, I'm seeing that a little bit more than I'd like to.
Nice. Okay, well, let's get started with probably current pressures that product managers are facing, and that is being asked to focus and zoom in on AI and accelerate AI based either features or entire products,
Mm.
quite often without clear strategy or significant goal in front of them. So where should these product teams start when being put in that position?
Mm. Yeah, I think this one's really interesting. I think when you look at product management in general, it's that like classic Venn diagram of like business, customer, and technology. And here it's kind of the same thing. So if you're kind of in a position where you're being asked to come up with an AI feature or something powered by AI, there's a lot of research that I think needs to be done in the first place. First, the most obvious thing really to me is what goals, what problems, what opportunities is your business trying to solve or kind of be in that space in the first place? Because really, ultimately, the success of whatever it is that you build is going to be judged by whether or not it was impactful to the business, and then secondly as well to your customers or end users. So understanding like what what is actually impactful to the business, what is the strategy, what are you trying to achieve, um, and then kind of matching that to the capabilities that AI can offer. And sometimes that might not be necessarily the most obvious things. Like sometimes it's summarizing, sometimes it's synthesizing, sometimes it's generating. But if none of those kind of match up to what your business is trying to do in the first place, then there's probably no point investing the time in them. So there's that kind of side of things, which I think is really, really important. And then the second kind of market side of things, kind of end user side of things, but is also what problems do your customers actually have that you can match up to what's possible with the technology. So as an example, at Intercom, our customers were really, really struggling because they were getting thousands and thousands of conversations coming through the messenger. And if you're not familiar with Intercom, it's essentially a way to message your customers through a live messenger on your website or in your product. And by installing that, our customers were opening themselves up to lots of people having conversations with them, which initially is great. But then when you get to the point in time that actually the volume of conversations can't be handled by your team, then you're kind of in a bit of a sticky situation, especially if you want to keep that quality of service really high. So yeah, in that case, AI is the perfect solution in a lot of respects because actually it can handle a high volume of those conversations and triage them or answer them directly and actually take that load off of the team. So that was really important. Whereas if we'd have looked at maybe summarizing or looking at other aspects of AI that was possible at that point in time, it may not have been so successful because it wasn't driving business value and it wasn't driving or solving a problem for our customers as well. So yeah, it's really important, I think, to match those things together.
I'm hearing a lot of validation around the product discovery process here, around going deep in truly understanding the problem. Can I ask, Naomi, is there anything in your career experiences where you feel like AI is the solution, so you shape your product discovery in a different way to discover different things around customer problems? Or is your product discovery the same as looking to increase clicks on a button or engagement on a certain feature? Is there anything you do different in product discovery for when you feel it's going to be an AI solution down the line?
Yeah, as in like rather than just going through your normal product process, do you do anything slightly different? Yes, actually, I think the understanding the problem and understanding, I think, like the impact to the business is roughly the same. I think just because AI is kind of there are so many leaps and bounds happening at the moment. I would also lean a little bit more heavily on the market side of things just to see kind of what's available. Um, which model should you be using, which is pretty topical right now. So yeah, there's a little bit of that side of things that I think is slightly different. And then the other thing that, I mean, in my opinion slash throughout my career, always involving engineering early, like at the same time as you're thinking about things and sharing your kind of insights and kind of thought processes as soon as you have them. Like you should be in lockstep with your engineering team all the time anyway with product. But I think the slight difference, especially when you're building, and this is for any kind of like new technology where it's a big bet and no one's done it before, but just happens to be AI for me, is actually working on experiments, validating that the technology can do what you think it can do. And yeah, just having a little bit more of that tech experimentation up front, I think is more important when you're doing something that hasn't been done before. Because I think, for example, if you're building layouts or a design feature or a customization feature, like that's been done before, so you can kind of take a template or you can look at things that have been done before. But if you're doing something where actually it hasn't been done before, so how do we do this in the first place? Which I think is really interesting. Like when we were at SwiftKey, so SwiftKey is a language prediction keyboard available on mobile. And one of the key problems that we were kind of having at that point in time was actually how do we get people to know that they're inserting a prediction? So it's not that they've typed it, it's that we're actually predicting this word for them. And that took a huge amount of kind of design and engineering effort to work out how do you get that mental model into people's heads when they've never had that mental model there before. So yeah, that's probably a slight difference.
In that world, you're designing new heuristics that have never been established
Yeah.
up to that point. So it's got unique challenges. And I'm definitely hearing you on the engineering side around, not just focusing on the desirability from the customer side, but also the feasibility internally, that there's capability,
Yeah,
knowledge.
exactly. Like when we first started with our Gen AI chatbot at Intercom, actually we couldn't do follow-up questions. So now you can just have a back and forth conversation with ChatGPT or all of the others, really. And at the time we couldn't. So that was a case of how do we capture the most value in just one message?
Wow.
So yeah, in that circumstance, we actually found out that a lot of people were just writing hi or hello as their first message. And if you almost like waste your AI bot on that, then you're not really going to generate any value. Whereas, yeah, if you just decide, okay, these are going to be the answers to that message, and we'll wait until they actually give us the real question to use our bot, that was really important.
I love that you've got constraints driven innovation happening there. I'm sure those who do know Intercom, I think there's probably a world of resources available. But in this instance, your constraint is your customers' data they're giving you in the moment that is preventing you from using AI until you've got better data.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, exactly.
I'm going to switch it now, Naomi, over. Let's go up to the other end, out of the world of discovery and delivery in the product manager's space, up to company strategy. So there's obviously, in some instances, demand for shift within companies to either be bringing AI into the company or to be shaping the company around AI. What are your thoughts and expectations on how leaders should be considering strategic challenges that are ahead of them this year with those questions being asked?
Yeah, I think this one definitely kind of relates to the first one in a lot of senses, because you have to do that kind of like discovery, that research, and that kind of understanding, but you have to do it with like a longer lens. So you're looking like 1 year into the future to 5 years into the future. I mean, I don't actually think anyone right now can predict what's going to happen in the next 5 years when it comes to AI, but you kind of have to have that in mind. And then there's kind of a piece around as well, like, do you have the right setup or the right people or the right strategic pillars in place? One thing that I've seen quite a lot in, especially more early stage companies that maybe weren't early stage as AI companies, and then it's a kind of shift into how do we become an AI company. And the worst thing that I see is a kind of whole strategic pillar that's just AI something something, and it's just really undefined, and it's just this kind of it's my in a way worst nightmare, and also like really interesting problem to solve as a product leader, because you're kind of given a strategic pillar of just AI, and then maybe the sparkly logo that everyone's using, the iconography, and it's kind of like, okay, actually, if it is vitally important, which I think from an investor and just like a growth and scale and where things are going in the future, I do think it is important, but then definitely having some kind of research around where are competitors in this space, where's the market going in this space, and if you can't predict that, or it's not obvious at that point in time, then it's about connecting those kind of customer problems and what's possible with the technology. Um, but then I think there's also just a very kind of like people aspect to it. So, for example, are you a company where realistically you can actually build your own models? And the answer no is completely valid and totally, totally fine. Um, but then it does change what that pillar really becomes. Like, what are you uniquely positioned to be good at, and how does the AI side of things fit into that? Um, like, for example, both at the beginning at Typeform and Open, it's like actually the thing that makes those two absolutely brilliant companies is they're uniquely positioned to be excellent on the design side of things. So then it's a case of actually the model maybe is irrelevant, but it's the way that you implement the model into the rest of your product that becomes really, really important. Um, and then it's also like, how do you get the team excited about it? And I think if your unique kind of position is the design side of things, then you lean really, really heavily on that to get everyone involved and kind of excited about that direction. And it's quite specific as well. It's rather than AI, where most of the team or half of the team are really worried about losing their jobs because they're going to be replaced by AI. Actually, you're saying we're going to double down on what we already do really, really well. And we're just going to inject this kind of superpower into it, if you like. So yeah, that was definitely something that I'm also kind of feeling like the especially in the last 2 weeks with OpenAI and DeepSeek and all of this conversation around like the models, like this week, whose model is best. I actually think the winning strategy for any company isn't about building a model necessarily, or for most companies, it's not about building the next best model. It's more about how does that model bring value to your product, to your company, to your strategy? How does it generate value for business and for customers as well, and end users, if that's relevant?
Nice. I think you touched on a key point that could easily be overlooked either last year or this year with company strategy creation. There's so much focus on LLMs, and they're the new kid on the block, but machine learning around classification and regression has been with us for decades. And
Yeah.
I think businesses often overlook those concepts around how we can forecast how you'd classify something, or how you'd put something on a bench scale, and use some existing AI and focusing on some simple problems before you focus in on how do we use generative AI in all corners of the company, particularly
Yeah.
businesses that aren't mature enough really to just go all in on AI from a zero base starting point.
And it's such a leap as well, like to go from we don't have anything to now we've got our own language model and you can chat back and forth with it is a huge leap, really. Um, so yeah, I think how do you bolster what you already have, like your main piece, with some elements of AI, I think is, and also how do you make sure that they're scalable pieces as well? Because I think that's one of the kind of main benefits of using AI in the first place is that you can just do a much higher volume than you would be able to do without it. So yeah, how does it impact your growth? How does it impact your ability to scale? Because those are going to be key things.
I could be wrong, but from memory, that was sort of Intercom's approach as well, strategically. Like when you chatted to Intercom, first of all, there was a classification that happened. Is your problem one of these three?
Yeah.
Then the chatbot came years later. Is that correct?
Yeah. Article suggestions
That's it.
was the first. Yeah, good memory. No, article suggestions was first, and then the bot came later. Which it makes sense. And actually, in the background, like the machine learning team was working on our answer bot kind of engine in the background for months before it really ended up inside the product. Same at SwiftKey, our kind of engine team, we were calling them. They'd be working on things way in advance of things actually ending up in the product. And that's kind of that discovery phase we were talking about earlier, where you're trying to discover the customers, the market, the problems, the opportunities, but at the same time, you're trying to discover what is the technology, like how does this work and how can this work for us? And then also you get the incredibly smart and brilliant people who the best thing that they can do on the engineering side is tell you that will not work. Because you have all of these like wild ideas with AI where you think, oh yeah, we'll just be able to have like a back and forth conversation, and that will be really easy, and it'll be able to take context from the previous message, or yeah, we'll be able to predict full sentences based on what someone has typed before, and it's like, no, that just won't work. And for a product person and for like design and everyone building, that's the most useful thing, because I think when you're building something completely new that's not been done before, you do get excited and your kind of imagination does run away with you a little bit. So having someone kind of give you those constraints that are realistic and reasonable is maybe annoying at the time, but actually is extremely powerful, because otherwise, if they don't give it to you, you maybe won't find them, and then it'll be your customers or your end users that actually find those constraints in a really probably quite annoying way.
Okay. Can I ask, bring it back to the start of your career, starting in engineering? Um, in those situations, do you think those early days of engineering have helped you have uh, a better understanding when it comes to those types of conversations around feasibility constraints?
I think that this is a really interesting topic. I was actually talking to someone at VDIO who we were having this same conversation, because we both have really similar backgrounds in terms of going from engineering into product. And it's like we were talking about, do you want to hire product managers that have that kind of technical background when you're working in this space or not? And actually, we were both really biased because we both had this similar sort of background, and it was like, actually, I feel like personally that's really helped to have those kind of conversations, and also it just gives you that way of thinking through, I guess, all of the variables, all of the possible constraints, and all of those kind of things that sometimes what you want to be thinking about building is not the end product, but a step towards it. So you want to have a kind of sense of, if we step towards it in this way, are we kind of building ourselves into a dead end, or are we actually building something that you could move from in, like, if these are the 3 or 4 options that we have, are we essentially taking 2 of those options away if we go in this direction to begin with? Or if we went this direction, are the 3 options still available at the end of time? So, and actually that was something that me and one of the engineering managers at Intercom now used to talk about, where it's like, actually, you just want to make sure that the first step is building in options and optionality, so you're not building yourself into a dead end.
Nice, nice. Well, I'm hearing that engineering background is definitely been an advantage. Um,
I think so, yeah, and it
um,
depends where you are in the product org as well, because I think if you're like a growth PM, then it's potentially not that useful, and maybe a data background would be much more useful, or a business background would be much more useful. But I think when you're essentially inventing technology or doing technology in a different way, I think it's really helpful, but I am aware how biased I am.
I think everyone being T-shaped in their knowledge is an advantage. So
Yeah.
everyone having some engineering capabilities certainly an advantage. Okay, let's bring it back to some of those career experiences. Intercom B2B SaaS, SwiftKey consumer product. I'm assuming been in the App Store.
Yeah.
Um, let's tie that back to revenue growth and profitability. Obviously, the cheap capital that was available 4 or 5 years ago is no longer available. There's more intent from investors to see businesses and invest in businesses that can generate revenue growth more rapidly than ever, but also acquire profitability faster than ever. So, how does AI contribute to this?
Yeah. This I think is quite interesting because I think when I was first thinking about this, I had one very, very clear idea on this, and I think I've kind of got to the space where I'm like, actually, there's probably two, maybe slightly opposing ways of thinking about this, and it also depends whether you're really early stage or maybe sort of Series B, C, something like that, and you're kind of adding AI into an existing kind of functioning product and company. But I think one thing that we did at Intercom initially was actually thinking of it was called AnswerBot. So thinking of AnswerBot as an addition, so almost like an expansion pack kind of experience where actually we had existing customer support customers. We knew the customers that were having real problems with volume of conversations. And so the thought process was actually, let's add this AI chatbot, but as a kind of expansion pack to what they're already using. I think that was useful in it, and it made sense certainly at the time because it wasn't central to what Intercom was doing at that point in time, and since then it's really changed. But I think that's quite a nice way of testing it out in a pretty safe environment where you haven't like locked it into people's pricing plans. So if they're on like an enterprise or pro plan or something like that, and you've locked them in on actually you have unlimited access to AI or particular calls or that sort of thing, then that can be quite scary, I think, because then you're sort of locked into that for however long those customers are on those subscriptions or those pricing plans. But the other way that I've seen this kind of thing done, which was, I don't know, I think this is a little bit more around how do you think about your AI product? Like in the case of Intercom, actually, it was all about volume. So, do you charge by the amount of conversations that the bot is able to handle, or do you charge, for example, by the amount of conversations that you know that customer is actually having month on month? Because then you can get a good sense of actually how much that costs. So they're the kind of ways I've been thinking about and using AI in terms of like changing the pricing plans and changing the subscription models. Because I think if you are already in a company where you have an existing product, then actually you're trying to work out how do I add, you don't want to spend 6 months building an AI feature and then not really generate any revenue off the back of it. You want it to sort of change things markedly. But the other thing, maybe you don't explicitly charge for AI. And this is another potential way of thinking about things. So adding it into the pricing plans and thinking about it that way was definitely something that we did a lot at Intercom, but not so much at like Typeform or like SwiftKey. It's like the core of the product is AI. And the same at AndOpen, like automation was like, we really needed that to be in place. So then rather than thinking of explicitly driving revenue that's like attached to your AI feature or your AI product, then it's more about how does this enable us to scale and grow? So it's less of a direct kind of impact to revenue in terms of you don't necessarily get the benefit of being able to say, oh, this generated 1 million in revenue for this year. Like, you don't necessarily get that in the same way. But what it does allow you to do is to say, actually, for example, at AndOpen, it wasn't directly AI, but it was automation. So we were able to drive up the volume of gifting through self-serve automation. So it actually allows you to scale as a company without increasing your costs, which, again, extremely important. And I mean, you could argue that revenue could, in that theory, stay the same, but your contribution margin would increase. So you're actually generating more money overall. And that's I think a really interesting way of thinking about AI, which is not as direct and not as kind of you don't have the cost of having to like brand it and market it in the same ways and try and sell that pricing plan or that expansion pack, if you like. But it does enable growth and it does enable scale in a different way that then can contribute to revenue as well.
So much AI potential can often be behind the scenes that no one really sees, particularly customers, because it's not a shiny new feature with a little star on the iconography,
Yeah.
like we were talking about earlier. When it comes to implementing AI, maybe to replace logical or algorithmic processes with, let's say, generative AI, as an example, what's your thoughts on how do you then adjust your pricing structure and rationalize it for customers if you think the pricing structure needs to be adjusted to cover additional costs through GPUs, services to run the model on, or through using, ChatGPT API costs, etc. What do you think should be passed on and reconsidered when it comes to pricing when the feature is being improved by AI, but it's all behind the scenes and the customer's really not going to see too much difference?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I think it also terrible answer. It also depends, but I think it depends on what the AI is replacing.
Right.
So, as an example, like at both actually AndOpen and at Intercom, essentially you're replacing people's time. So to get a gift out the door or to resolve a customer query, actually before we implemented anything, it was just human beings doing all of that work, and yeah, having to get the responses or to get the gifts out the door. And then you step through those changes, and those people are having to handle higher and higher volumes of gifts or conversations. And then it kind of gets to a bit of a breaking point where, okay, either you have to make those teams bigger, either as like an Intercom customer, as us, as AndOpen, or you have to implement technology to make that whole process much more efficient. So in those circumstances, I think with Intercom, for example, I think the pricing choice of actually adding an expansion or adding that kind of plan for AI makes a lot of sense, because essentially, as a customer, your choice is, do I hire a larger team or do I pay this amount that actually enables me to scale my current team more than I'd be able to do without the technology? So I think maybe in that sense, I'm kind of old school in the way I think about AI and technology, because I think it's like, if you're getting value from the technology, especially if it's value that otherwise you'd have to pay for, then I think it's reasonable to pay for it, if that makes sense. And that's probably an example of something where it's a little bit more obvious that you are getting that help, but only if we make it obvious that that could have been done very much in the background without really anyone realizing, apart from the fact that they were handling a higher volume of conversations. But yeah, I think there's that side of things where if you are actually getting value out of it and you would otherwise have to pay for that value, then I think it's really reasonable. In other circumstances, I think it's a little bit more difficult. Probably requires a little bit more research and back and forth on whether or not it's something that's value enough to pay for. Um,
Well,
yeah.
we've spoken about getting customers to buy it, so that's the easy part done, as we all know. Um,
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
um, that's that job done. So let's talk about adopting AI features and retaining customers to keep using. What are the things to worry about and the things to consider to ensure that your metrics are going in the right direction there?
Mm. I have to say, this is one of my kind of favorite areas to think about actually as a product person. Like strategy, all that kind of thing, fine. But this is, I mean, I really enjoy the kind of like space between human and technology. And this is kind of like the first piece in a lot of essences that you really get that kind of at scale. How are people really reacting to the technology that you've built? Assuming that you've already done all of your kind of testing and that sort of things. But um, I think the interesting thing about adoption, which happened at SwiftKey, happened at Typeform, happened at Intercom, is with new and innovative technology, you get really early adopters, and they are thrilled. They're so happy that you've built a chatbot or that you've built XYZ or you've built a language prediction keyboard that they will bang their heads against the wall for as long as it takes to get it working, which is commendable. Personally, I'm probably not in that bucket of people. I get frustrated way too easily. But yeah, so when you're doing that kind of first release, or even sometimes when you're doing user research ahead of releasing something, or you're doing a beta, sometimes you just end up talking to people and you think, oh, we've really built something game changing here. Like we've really done it. And then when you actually release it, you haven't done it at all. Like no one knows what's going on. A really interesting example of this was again at SwiftKey, where people were so used to typing on their iPhones that they didn't even realize that we were predicting words for them. And then the people that did were super thrilled, but they also didn't really kind of fully understand what the interaction actually was, but just really excited. And that's kind of dangerous because you end up thinking, we've really got it. But actually, yeah, if the person doesn't have that mental model in their head of what's happening, then it's quite hard to show them that this value is happening, and they end up kind of dropping off, really. And at Intercom, it was kind of the same, because initially we had to get people essentially to train the bot for us, which for people who wanted to train a bot was brilliant, because they're just really excited to be involved in kind of that kind of experience. But for people that didn't have the mental model of, oh, I'm training a bot and this will help me in this way later, it's really hard to, I think, get that kind of quick mental model into people's heads, but also to kind of onboard them into it as well, because it can be quite a different experience to normal product, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about here is still ahead of us on this AI revolution. When I think about this intent that AI will be ubiquitous and it
Mm,
will replace Siri or be the new Super Siri that comes with Apple Intelligence, etc. It comes with new interaction patterns that are yet to be established. We've all spoken to Siri the same way for the last 10 years. To be honest, far too many times, repeating myself to Siri than I'd like to over the last 10
yeah.
years. And I'm hoping that AI will simplify that. But I also understand that with Apple Intelligence, I'll be able to talk to Siri in new ways. And Apple's got to teach me how to talk
Mm,
in new ways and reveal that new functionality and capability to me somehow. through a pattern that I don't yet know.
Yeah. Or
Uh,
one that you recognize. Like I think with Intercom, this was one of the lucky things about having a messenger is uh, everyone really knows how to use a messenger. And this is probably why like
right,
ChatGPT and all of them are using that kind of same sort of experience. It's like you already have the mental model of chatting to something or someone through a messenger. So it doesn't feel like a huge leap. But when you're using like retrieval augmented generation or something along those lines, where you're really having to say, okay, actually, we're going to create an answer for you that's based on the answers that you have in your help center, but you have to tell us which answers in the help center are relevant to which messages coming in. So no one has the mental model for that. We didn't have the mental model for that. So yeah, it's a completely different way of thinking. And one of the things that I realized kind of watching that development at SwiftKey and watching that development at Intercom is actually thinking about it more like onboarding was really useful. Because a lot of the times during those kind of onboarding sessions, you're giving an example of like, here's one I made earlier, or this is what it could look like at the end of kind of when you've completed whatever the process or the tasks happen to be. We used to do the same thing at Typeform, where it was like kind of templates give you that, here's an example of what this could end up looking like. But yeah, that kind of anything where it's like onboarding or examples. You see it all the time now with prompts where they'll give you like an example prompt, and that's super useful because it just gives you that sense of this is the sort of thing I can ask. And sometimes it's also useful to put in like, this won't help with XYZ if that happens to be the case. But yeah, I think that kind of onboarding mentality to get people used to whatever the tasks are or the process, or here's one we made earlier, like a template or an example is often really useful to just click the mental model into people's heads as quickly as possible.
nice. Naomi, to wrap us up, I'm keen. I'm having a lot of our conversations on the podcast with product people around the world, and I've got a new question to finish each episode, which is, run me through your personal AI tech stack from when you wake up in the morning to when you go to bed at night. You know, what in your world is AI?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question, actually, because despite the fact that I build a lot of it, I probably don't use a lot of it day to day, which is maybe surprising. But I think the reason for that is actually I'm experimenting with a lot of different things. So one thing I'm really experimenting with at the moment, which is super interesting, but yeah, it's kind of quite strange as well, is AI avatars for video generation. So yeah, I've used Synthesia and I've used Video, which yeah, it's super interesting. And as a product leader and always having to kind of generate product education and those kind of pieces, it's incredibly useful. Really useful kind of to be able to do that in case like on that day your hair's gone completely crazy and your makeup's all over your face, or you just don't really fancy like jumping in front of the camera. Actually being able to text type but have a video that's you go through a kind of education piece is more useful than I thought I would find it, actually. Yeah, it kind of creeps into the uncanny valley side of things, but definitely useful in that sense. And then the others are just I'm playing around with ChatGPT and DeepSeek, obviously now, and Claude, and then there's a couple as well that I'm interested in. So Clay do quite a lot of just research. So it's like a CRM go-to-market team kind of piece. But that's quite interesting when you're looking for interesting companies to reach out to and chat to. So that's quite a good one. And then I've also started looking at this space, which is AI agents, but as part of a workflow or platform like Zapier. It just seems to be, I don't think anyone's cracked it yet, but I think that will be something that happens about this, like AI agents as a workforce, and you can create a team out of them. I think it's quite an interesting space right now.
Awesome. Well, after you mentioned Synthesia there, I do wonder whether I've spent the last 46 minutes talking to an AI version of regardless, I'd like to say thank you to the real Naomi and the AI Naomi for joining me on this podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk through and hear some of your experiences and wisdom you shared on the show. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. For the audience listening, I hope you've also enjoyed what may be an AI version of me as well as Naomi on today's Product Coalition podcast. Thank you very much for listening. And if you'd like to know more about the Product Coalition, please head over to productcoalition.com.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Product Coalition podcast, hosted by Jay Stansell. Got questions or want to explore more topics? Connect with Jay on LinkedIn or join the ever-growing Product Coalition community on Substack. Thanks for listening.